Welcome back to State of the Nation right here on Morning Express. And, well, we'll continue that conversation. And just to read some of the tweets that are coming through, because that gives us also your participation in it. I have Okotho Kelo, who says that you believe Mzendege, whose entire family was burnt alive in Naivasha, has got justice. Which justice? Of course, well, our subject matter this morning is the ICC ruling that was given. And of course, we want to reflect as a country and know how do we move on, if at all it is time to move on, and how we do that. There's also Paul Otieno who says, who killed, burnt, displaced Kenyans? Or were they just happily celebrating elections? Of course, tone of sarcasm right there. We also have somebody who says, I am one of those who ask, fine, no case to answer, must be accepted, but there are questions that must be answered. And let me come to you, Haron Dubi, and just first of all, given the ruling and the civil society, and of course we do know that there are victims who still have not got justice. How do we as a country receive this news, and how do we move on?
First and foremost, perhaps I need to also add my voice to my interpretation of what the ruling is and what
Correct.
it means. First, the judges did not declare a verdict. They only said that there was a mistrial, meaning because, as they said, there was so much interference, both with witnesses and with political interference, that it was, the case was so contaminated, it was impossible to go on. Perhaps you can recall what Krigler said about the 2007 election, that it was impossible to know who the winner was because of the contamination, the toxicity, the toxicness that existed. Secondly, the judges also said that the prosecutor can revisit the case and reframe or repress the charges. And what that means is that she can come back here and investigate. She can invoke her powers under Article 60-something, 63 or 65, and investigate the matter. So that the celebrations you are seeing of those who think that the suspects were acquitted are misplaced in one sense. The third thing the judges said, or fourth, is that the victims are welcome to go and give their views about alternative forms of redress to themselves, whether by compensation, whether by the government of Kenya, or ideally by the government of Kenya, because the Victims Trust Fund has not opened its situation in Kenya to deal with the Kenyan victims in terms of compensation. What I am seeing in favor of the victims and Kenyans generally is that, not quite in favor, but to say that Kenyans have lost, because without justice, there is no likelihood of cohesion, there is no likelihood of people accepting and moving on, because those who suffered, and there are those who suffer directly, and the rest of us as Kenyans indirectly, have not been brought back to a situation where we can say we now feel like we are part of a just Kenya. So what we are asking, both as civil society and as individual victims, is what are the mechanisms the government is putting in place to ensure that we can feel the sense of justice, and then equality and equity, and move on as Kenyans, having accepted those who were the perpetrators confess their sins, confess their guilt, whether through a Gashasha type of mechanism like happened in Rwanda, and this will obviously need some legal reforms, which Beatrice and others can help us, or through a judicial mechanism where the truth gets to be known, those who are found guilty are punished, and the reparations are made for those who suffered, so that everybody gets a sense of fairness and justice.
Okay. Let me come to you, Norman. And as a country, one of the things that would help us move on, if at all we can move on, because I'm not quite sure what that term means. I think it means different things to different people when we talk about moving on. There are those who think moving on is simply, let's forget the past happened, open a new chapter and continue. But of course, with the victims, those who are displaced, those who lost loved ones, we have those who still go through traumatic experiences, just remembering. Those are people who, when you talk about moving on, they cannot identify with that particular fact. But one of the things that would help us as a country, maybe the word we should be using is have some form of closure, is first of all revisiting what was the cause. And the question here would be, do we as a country identify with what the cause was to ensure that we do not have a revisit in 2017 or even in the future?
There are various ways of looking at it. One is that we are basically 16 or so months to the next general election. And what that means is that there is largely nothing that is going to be done in terms of taking strategic steps towards putting closure mechanism to the questions of post-election violence in 2007, 2008. What actually you are likely to see is a trigger of the very factors that resulted in these skirmishes. Because, as I said earlier, we need to revisit the issues in Agenda 4. We need to firmly deal with the land question in the Rift Valley. That one is never going to go away. We need to get out of that feeling that there are people who got land which they didn't deserve, and that this land is being held by people they perceive to be aggressors. Unless we clear that, those flashes will always be there. Two is, if you look at the history of Kenyan elections since the advent of multipartyism in 1992, elections where an incumbent is defending his seat have tended to have scenarios of violence. If you look at 1997, 1992, the same situation was not there in 2002. And of course, matters were helped that the two leading lights in 2002 were both from the same community. So, one, in terms of dealing with the questions of closure, we need to have a proper mechanism of victim identification, because the same also is polluted. The number of IDPs seems to be growing by the day. We don't know whether there are those who have been born long after the post-election violence. So that needs to be addressed. Secondly, we need to look at the measures beyond resettlement of IDPs, because there are different forms of psycho effects on different victims. And these victims, we must create either traditional justice mechanisms where they can face their tormentors, a retribution is made, and as we can then begin to build a cohesive society built on truth and honesty. Otherwise, if we continue to ponder the issues of justice with the questions of move on, the country cannot move on when there is a strong sense of injustice. That peace that will be there will be built on quicksand, and any small trigger will be able to upset the balance and the tranquility that we are experiencing today. So critically, the mere factor that we are heading to another election that is going to be hotly contested, I think we must take a step back as a country and look at the issues that have tended to divide the people of this country and deal with them firmly in a very honest way, in a very strategic way, so that we lay a farm for a fair election in 2017, and the regime that takes over after that can then be able to sustain the measures that will have been taken, so that the ICC ruling on Tuesday should only be the beginning of a national reflection. Actually, we shouldn't be having celebration. What is needed is a process of national reflection, that we are able now to put ourselves firmly in the shoes of the victims and stand with them and take measures that will be able to create a society that views the future of this country through the same lenses.
Okay. Senator Beatrice Elachi, do we have our finger on the cause? Because without getting the cause, then it's going to be very difficult not to have a repeat.
First of all, just to say that if we want to really move on as a country, and I don't want to lie to Kenyans here that I feel what Geduko went through, to be a lie. I'll be lying. And when we talk about the victims, and that's why I was saying, I think as Kenyans, we really need to ask ourselves, when we talk about these people, do we understand they are human beings? Do we understand they are emotional? Or we take it to play our politics so that we please ourselves and play the politics? This is not a matter of coming here and play politics with people's lives. They've gone what they've gone through. If you really wanted to follow how the victims have moved with life, it is always important to go to the ground and just sit down with them, listen to their voices. You'll be so surprised. Some of them even decided, let us sit down with the same perpetrators that we knew. These are the people who came and did the 1, 2, 3. And we have decided, I will move my land. Some of them even just exchanged the land. You'll be so surprised how them themselves decided to do what they will call reconciliations to ourselves and move. But the political class decided to play politics, which I can see we really continue playing the same politics. And for me, we have to stop it as Kenyans. We must know these were lives. They have decided, who are we to come? You want to start a Kasheshe court? You think they'll come there? They'll ask you, do you know what I've gone through for 10 years? Do you think I'm ready? The best the government can do, and the government knows exactly how to identify where all these people are, is come up with a serious program. If they really indeed want to see Kenyans move on, go to each family, support each family to move on with their lives, to bring back their properties and move. We are trying to make this an issue. In 2017, any politician, even me seated here, who will sit down and celebrate when a Kenyan is on the floor dying because of me to become a leader, then be it you'll be cast with your children. It will never be again the things we used to do. That is why we have a new dispensation in this country. And even what I saw in